Longtime Congressman from the 11th District of the Commonwealth of Virginia and the current Director of Federal Government Affairs for Deloitte Consulting. Tom Davis, thank you so much.
Hey, thank you. Come on. Thanks. And I'm proudest of the fact that I left Congress undefeated and unindicted, so you always just got to be proud. My job today is to try to get this thing, keep it on schedule, so I may shorten a little bit what I was going to say, but my title was going to be Public Sector Challenges to your class. And when you talk about speed to market, you're not talking about the government. I think we understand. But I want to just talk a little bit about macro, what's going on, and then talk about what you can do. Let me just start with, you can't start a speech this week without talking about the political situation in Washington. It's just absolutely gridlocked. We spent billions of dollars now in this campaign, and we got the same players sitting there. John Boehner feels that he has a mandate. His team is fully in charge of the House. Harry Reid thinks he's got a mandate. He picked up 2 seats in a year. Everybody thought the Senate Democrats would lose seats. The president thinks he has a mandate. He won re-election. Yeah, but it's the same players. And so you have the House and the Senate. You got the Republicans and Democrats still at each other, the executive branch and legislative branch. And for those of you that are from here, there's really only one thing, as you know, that brings this town together. And that is, however briefly each year, and that is the Redskins. The Redskins, everybody comes and cheers on the same team. And just, I like to tell this story because I was out at the Redskin opener. I was sitting way up in the cheap seats, but I noticed an empty seat on the 50-yard line. It was empty at the end of the first quarter and the second quarter, so at halftime I walked down to it, about 8 tiers. Took me about the whole halftime to get there. It was still empty. It was next to an elderly lady. And I tapped her on the shoulder and said, "Ma'am, is this seat taken?" She said, "Well, as a matter of fact, it's not." I said, "Would you mind if I sit here for the second half?" I said, "I can barely see the field with my binoculars up there." She said, "Please, I could use the company." I said, "I can't believe there's an empty seat here in the 50-yard line. These seats are scalping for hundreds of dollars out front." And she said, "Well, that was my husband's ticket." She said, "We'd been to 20 straight Redskin openers together." She said, "But he died." He said, "But I know he would have wanted me to be here today." And I said, "Ma'am, I am so sorry." I said, "But couldn't you have found a friend or a relative that could have used the other ticket?" And she said, "No." She said, "They're all at the funeral." So let me just talk about the state of play right now, entering government with new ideas. Government needs new ideas. It needs entrepreneurship like it has never needed it before. But they've got to get through a few issues first. You have right now the intersection of several issues that were delayed over the last year because they were uncomfortable to deal with. And as a result of that, the next 2-3 months, I think, will tell where it's going up. And maybe Senator Warner will add his perspective of this. But basically, you have these sequestering budget cuts coming in that could literally rip government contracts in half that are ongoing throughout the bureaucracy if that is implemented. That takes effect January 2nd, absent congressional action. You have the expiration of the tax cuts that were passed 10 years ago. They call them the Bush taxes. They expire on December 31, absent some action from the Congress and the President. You have the funding for the fiscal year, which started October 1st. They didn't get the budget done. They just kicked it over and gave a continuing resolution until March. What does that mean? It means no new contracts are being let. Agency heads not sure what their budget's going to be for the year, reluctant to utilize option years to put new contracts out till they know what their budget's going to be the year. Congress has to address that again before March. And then on top of that, you have a debt ceiling vote coming up. After the first of the year, where we need congressional action with the debt ceiling. So, you know, we've been through this before. We haven't been through it, I think, to such a great degree. And let me just explain to you, Davis, you've given us the bad news. I think there are more opportunities for emerging companies with innovative ideas to help the government than we've ever had. I think there's not probably a better time to get into it. Congress will get through this. It will be ugly, it always is, the sausage making once it gets transparent. But they will get through these issues and resolve them in one shape or form. And as they find out that they're going to have to do more with less, that they're not going to have the money they had before, but they have the same missions, they're going to be looking for you in terms of how can we save money, how can we operate more effectively, how can we communicate better with the constituencies that we're supposed to interact with, because the old ways don't work. The old ways are basically stovepiped, and the world is changing, and government is going to have to change with it, and I think there's nothing like a fiscal crisis to force on government and the inertia that has just grappled it for so long, and to kind of break out of that mold. And Anish talked a little bit about that before. Things are starting to change, and they're starting to gel, and on his watch they started to. Now there's a greater impetus than ever before for these, because the current fiscal course is just not sustainable. It's going to change. So politically, while the leaders have been kicking the can down the road, we have this intersection that offers us opportunities where government's going to be forced to do more with less. So when you have programs that introduce efficiencies into the way government manages, the way they track things, the supply chain, these kind of issues, getting them into government now is important. In the past, when government faced a fiscal crisis, they just worry about saving their people. The incentives in government have been perverse. The incentives of government have been, if I save money, I don't get any credit for that. That just goes over to some agency that overspent their budget, or it doesn't go to the greater good. The emphasis now is, your budget's cut, we expect you to do the same thing. So as the incentives change, government will change. And they're going to find out, without more additional slots and additional people, and with limited budgets, they're going to be looking for you to help solve their problems. To introduce efficiencies, as I said before, to utilize more mobile technology and communications, basically to smash the stovepipes that have existed in government for years. You have so many legacy systems sitting in government agencies that don't communicate with other systems, that we're doing patch management constantly, trying to communicate between agencies. It's very, very inefficient. It's very, very expensive. This is a great opportunity for those of you with innovative ideas to help smash those stovepipes, to break down those silos. And government needs it now more than ever before. Anish talked a little bit about that in the last panel, talked about some of the things they have tried to do. Now is the time they're going to have to do it, because the money just isn't there to operate the way we have been operating before. I think they're going to change the way they contract. I think share and savings contracts, which have generally not been utilized, are going to come into vogue. I know the administration is looking at some legal changes that will allow that. Now, what's a share and savings contract? It means if you can go to the government and say, you allow me to implement my idea, I can save you X amount of dollars. They'll say, okay, do it. We're not paying you until we see the savings, but we're willing to negotiate on that basis, almost a semi-contingency. The government utilized that for years. Appropriators in Congress didn't like it because they didn't control the money. They didn't have any say of the action place. Local governments have used it for years, and it has saved government billions and billions of dollars. The administration recognizes now moving in this direction is a way that can save the government money, and there's no downside to that. Now, for an entrepreneur, that means you upfront the cost. But if you can execute well, there's a tremendous upside to that. And as the GA owners have reviewed these, they say there's probably a better markup if you can bid those correctly than in anything in any of the traditional vehicles. Time and materials, cost plus, the traditional types of vehicles. Shared services is going to be a continuing need of government as they look around to break these down. Movement to cloud computing. Government can't do this internally. They don't have the internal expertise to do this. They're going to be looking at ways to do this in a cost-effective manner. That opens up opportunities for entrepreneurs, and particularly niche entrepreneurs. Frankly, government has to continue to look to the private sector for innovation, for new ideas and new energy solutions, new alternatives around, because that is traditionally how government does. They have traditionally outsourced their R&D to the private sector. I think you're going to see more of that than ever. They will not have the resources internally to do that. So the marketplace of ideas, whether it's energy solutions, IT solutions, and the like, I think those opportunities continue. For the government contractors who specialized in staff augmentation, we call it the old butts and seats, those jobs are going down. They're going to have to change their business models. So if your model is, I'm going to supply the government experts and put them into government, I think you'll see a diminished role for that over time. What happened is the government started to go out to these companies because it was easier to hire a contractor than it was to hire a federal employee. You couldn't fire a federal employee once you hired him, but if you didn't like the contractor, you could get rid of them. So as government built up over the last decade, that is where the people came from. Now as they start to downsize, those are the first jobs to go. But for innovative ideas that the government needs, that they can't get anywhere else, they have to go to the private sector. They internally can't do that, and that just opens up a host of ideas for companies with those kind of business plans and ideas. This is going to be a culture shock to the bureaucracy. Traditionally, it's been resisted by entrenched government interest groups. It's been criticized by defenders of the status quo who have vested interests in the status quo, and from risk-averse management. Most managers in government don't get rewarded for taking risks. They get rewarded for staying within the regulations and doing their jobs and getting their budget each year. But that is going to change, and it's going to change with rapidity given the fiscal situations we faced. So these changes are inevitable. It's still government. It's still operating slowly, but I'm telling you the opportunities are going to be out there. Companies and firms and startups need to start now. What do? Start engaging the federal agencies. Start meeting with their CIOs, meeting with their CFOs, meeting with their assistant secretaries, saying, what are your needs? Their job is to interact with the private sector to find out what ideas are out there, and ask them what's on their mind and come back with creative solutions. Then you have the other difficulty of startups is many times, how many of you, any of you doing business with the federal government now? How many of you doing business with the government now? Yeah. One of the difficulties we found in Congress is that some of those innovative companies just didn't do business with the federal government. They didn't do it because it was hard to get on schedules, hard to get on contracting vehicles, and because the accounting procedures were so different, sometimes you had up separate. That stuff is being streamlined now. Getting on the GSA Group 70 schedule, for example, as a startup, it takes a little bit of time, but it's worth it because that is a selling vehicle that you can use across government to be able to sell your goods and particularly services in the IT area as well. Getting on schedules or doing business and liaisoning and partnering with companies that do have those vehicles is important. A lot of the larger companies don't have some of the niche ideas you had. They have, in many cases, small business set-aside goals they have to meet, so they're looking for innovative companies to do business with. Sitting down with those companies like mine at Deloitte, we're always looking for innovative companies to do business with that we can share with. We have the buying vehicles to do this. We're on the schedules. We have the GWACs, but we don't always have the ideas, and we don't always have the small business proportions that we would like. And that's an easy way sometimes to get your nose in the tent. Then when the government sees your work and likes you, they'll find a way to get you on one of their schedules and deal with you directly. But it's a good, fast way, and as I say, in some of these innovative areas that are going to save money, the government is going to be doing more of that, not less. The areas they're going to be cutting back in is going to be the staff augmentation and the old butts and seats. Find teaming partners to work together on some of these issues and continue to dialogue, as I said before, with the CIOs, the CFOs, agency deputy heads. Ask them what their problems are and how they see their needs. Sometimes they don't even understand the kinds of things that the government, that the private sector can bring together. In summary, let me just say the old contractor models is gone. New contracting models are going to stand up. You have an administration, I think, recognizes the need to be innovative in these areas. They can do a lot of this just through the executive branch, but I think you're going to see more partnering with Congress on these things, and it's going to open up a world of opportunity for entrepreneurs like yourself to do business with the government and bring your ideas to the public sector. So again, congratulations on a great conference, and thanks for allowing me to share a few thoughts with you.
Thank you so much, Congressman.